So I just want to welcome everybody to the first in a series of seminars where we're going to explore issues, policy issues, and the implications for under the new administration. I think we're all anticipating a lot of changes as we move forward, and we want to make sure that we're ready to respond to these changes as a community. Hopefully you were able to pick up a flyer when you came in. If not, on your way out you can pick up a flyer that lays out the seminars for the rest of the year. I'll get to today's seminar in a few minutes, but in January we're going to be looking at, the title of the session is Will What Goes Up Come Down? Looking at prescription drug prices. Then in February we're going to talk about gun policy, gun violence. In March, we're going to have a guest speaker talking to us about approaches for community and political organizing. In April, we'll have Tom Burke coming back from his stint at the EPA, talking, yes, he's looking forward to coming back, talking about challenges for science and environmental health policy. And then we'll round out this series in May with a seminar which should be really interesting. The title of it is, Can Transportation Infrastructure Be a Win for Public Health? So it's something a little bit different than what we typically think about when we think about public health, and Keisha Pollack is going to be leading that seminar. So I would urge you all to avail yourself of these seminars, and I think all of them are in Hampton House except the one in January, which is in Page Hall. But again, this will be obviously circulated widely as we move forward. It's a great pleasure today to welcome Dr. Shelley Hearne back to the School of Public Health. So very importantly, Shelley has done a lot in her life, but she is still a visiting professor here in the Department of Health Policy and Management. She used to teach the course in public health advocacy that now Josh Horowitz teaches in the fourth quarter. I'm putting in a plug for that course. Those of you who are interested in learning more about advocacy, I would encourage you to sign up for that course. Shelley started that course and really pulled it together. She got to the point where she couldn't do it all within a 24/7 schedule, and she was very helpful in us landing Josh to continue a great course. But she has done incredible work over the last 3 decades. She's been described as a change maker bent on boosting the health, safety, and sustainability of our planet and the people on it, and I think that really captures all of what Shelley does. She was the founding executive director of the Trust for America's Health and also the former managing director of the Pew Health Group of the Pew Charitable Trusts, overseeing its food safety, medical safety, research, and biomedical programs. She currently spends much of her time now as an independent consultant working with foundations, not-for-profit organizations, policymakers to tackle some of the real thorny public health issues of the day with an emphasis on the environment. She has and continues to serve the field of public health. Just a couple of things, a couple of highlights from all that she has and continues to do for the field. But she was chair of the APHA's executive board and vice president of the Council on Education for Public Health, or CEPH. It's what's the new name now? There's a new name. I'm looking at Al. Yeah, CPPH. No, that's true. Sorry. No, that's something different. This is the council that accredits schools of public health and programs in public health. She has received numerous awards over her career. Just a couple that stand out is the Senator Lautenberg Award for Lifetime Achievement in Public Health Advocacy, which she'll talk about with us today, as well as a citation from APHA's executive director. Shelley has a DrPH, Environmental Health, from Columbia University, and as I said, most importantly, she's a visiting professor in our own Department of Health Policy and Management. And in her role as a current visiting professor, she has in the past, and she will be teaching again this year in our Winter Institute. She'll be teaching a course entitled Facts Matter, Effective Advocacy for Public Health Policy. So those, very important message there. So those of you who might be interested in that institute, you can contact us. As I mentioned, she used to teach the course in health advocacy, which is scheduled for fourth quarter of this year. And while we're talking about advocacy, I thought it would be important to mention those of you who have not are not aware or have not signed up for it. David Jernigan is going to be leading a one-day course in public health advocacy, right? This Saturday. I asked him if it had been scheduled yet, and he said, yes, it's this Saturday. It's here, it's not here, but in the School of Public Health in 4030 over in the Wolf Street building from 9:30 to 4:30. But the important thing is that you have to pre-register. And apparently there's still room left. So if you're interested, you need, apparently there was a blast email that went out. If you can't find that particular email, just contact David, Dr. Jernigan, and he'll show you where to sign up for it. But very importantly, you have to register. But I would encourage you all, it's a great opportunity to immerse yourself in advocacy for a day-long session. And he did make a very important addition to that announcement, and that is lunch will be served during the day. So without further ado, I'm thrilled that Shelley agreed to come back and spend at least an hour or so with us, and hopefully we'll be able to get her back more times over the next year. But Shelley?
Thanks. So I'm mic'd, which is a dangerous thing, but you can still hear me, right? It's not a commercial. Though I do want to do a commercial for you, David. Anything he teaches on advocacy, take it, especially if there's lunch. That's I would like to come back up for that. It's also it's wonderful to be back here. I was mentioning before, it feels a little bit like old homecoming. The good dean. I guess I can't call it. What do you call a dean?
What's a dean? Always a dean.
Well, and I was about to say the good dean, but you know Al Sommer. You know, he's I love seeing you here. And there are many people who I've been working with over the years in a little troublemaking, and that's a good thing, because I think that that's the role all of us in public health have to do, and particularly as you were describing the course that I'm teaching in January, facts matter. It wasn't written as a laugh line. It actually, I know that, what is it, the word of the year for Oxford Dictionary is post-factual. That's the #1 new word of the year. And there's truth to it. We've just watched the most amazing devolution of facts in history. But facts matter more than ever. But you have to know where to use them. And I think we just saw where you don't use them. There's a time and a place, but in public health, and particularly here in this field of science, the integration of evidence-based to drive good policy making, you gotta stay true to a factual-based information. That's our credibility. That's our cachet. That's our card. And I want to talk a little bit more about this in the context of giving some of my perspective from Washington, where I work at the city level, national, and many years. I sounded like a very old lady as you were describing things, Ellen, but don't be fooled by the gray hair. What I feel like I need to start, though, with 3 caveats. One, I'm unusually cranky. And a lot of you know I'm not that type, but this has been, and I think it's true for probably many in the room, this has been really hard to watch the progress that we've made on so many public health issues be at such risk, at such jeopardy. Affordable Care Act, climate change, the achievements that we've had in tobacco. It's a long list, and they are at risk. And the second caveat is this can't be about what it is and how it feels personally. Because I am giving you a little bias here. I'm showing you kind of, yeah, I'm upset, but I'm really mostly upset, and this is where the focus is and why I'm so cranky, is that it's not political. I don't really care if you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. I do care if you voted. I hope you did. But I actually pray there are a bunch of Republicans in this room, because this isn't going to be a team effort. This is going to be the biggest fight of your career. And yes, I've got 3 decades, and I'll tell you, this is going to be the biggest fight of my career, too. We've been through a lot of things. We've had some similar experiences, but this is on steroids. So what we have to do is take a look at what worked in the past, but also recognize it is a new day and age. This post-factual dynamic is real, but we have got to figure out how to thread the needle, focus, be strategic, be smart, and sustained in what we do in order to win this one. So, did I say I was cranky? Yeah. I actually, I really do see some pathways forward, and it's part why we titled this Retreat, Defense, or the Ultimate Win. And I think it's going to be a little of all of the above. And those of you who know me, you also know I'm not a Pollyanna. That's part of the cranky side, too. But you really know it because I'm from New Jersey. And we aren't Pollyannas. We're a very pragmatic group. Anyone from New Jersey in here? You're the brave one. She's willing to say it. All right. Jersey strong. What we really have to do is be very focused and understand, where do you retreat? Because that is a tactic that you have to think about. You got to pick and choose out there where your efforts are going to be best served. You got to think about, where do you build an incredible defense? But you constantly have to be thinking about where the win might be and prepared, because that is a lesson that we learned before. And I'm going to make some references to the 104th Congress, the Contract for America. Any of you remember that one? A handful. That was 1994. Was anyone born in 1994? Oh, yes. All right. Now, Sommers, put your hand down. This is, we believe in facts here. God, once a dean, always a dean. They can. The 104th Congress was a fascinating time because in somewhat similar ways. It was seen as an assault on many of the core issues that we cared about in the public health area. And in fact, one of the big pledges when an all-Republican House and Senate came in, led by, at the House, Newt Gingrich, they had formulated a very clever, very smart game plan called the Contract for America, which included something called regulation reform, reg reform. And it actually built on some of the efforts that had been going on before of building into a frustration, and it's going to sound awfully familiar, that the American public had, that government was bloated. There were too many things holding us back. We weren't doing well, and we had to roll back some of those regulations in environment, in workplace safety, in education, a variety of areas. And it was really a front that was dismantling some really core basic environmental protections. Protections on clean air, Safe Drinking Water Act, a lot of worker protections. And it was starting to be fairly effective. But the advocacy communities put together a game plan that didn't look at focusing on just their single issues, but actually joined together to find what were the 1 or 2 really core issues that the American public would care about, understand, and start to use as an effective wedge to not only push back, but at the end of the day, it was seen as such an overreach by Congress in dismantling those basic public health protections that it actually was a time where we got some amazing legislative wins in response. Safe Drinking Water Act was reformed. FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act. Thank you. That's it's kind of like two all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles. Yeah, that was good. Thanks, Paul. There were a number, it was such an overreach that we were able to move and get some really key wins. But you're only able to get those key wins if you have them in the ready. So it was a really good defense, an incredibly focused, strategic one. It wasn't on everything. It was to help people get it was going too far in dismantling the things we care about, and then a door opened to move what was ready from the public health side. And so that's the kind of thinking that we have to have with some really new twists and turns in preparation. But let's talk about what's retreat and what's defense. And I want to focus to really is a good example that is going on right now. We're speculating what the agenda will be in this next administration. There haven't been a lot of specificities. This isn't a political statement, it's just a statement of facts. They are my facts, but I think most of you will agree in this room. We don't really know what all the parts and pieces are going to be that are put in, but we're having some clues by the appointments to the various agencies that will be implementing the laws, putting in effect the rules, the regulations, the enforcement. So this is a critical time, despite the administration's not in place, that the selection of those who are going to lead those agencies are absolutely critical. So let's take a look at two proposed names that are up there right now. One is Tom Price, Congressman Tom Price, is the Secretary nominee. Is that the official title? Not elect. Secretary nominee for HHS. The Congressman is a vowed opponent of the Affordable Care Act. He's a vowed opponent of reproductive rights issues. He has looked at, on a number of fronts, on how to dismantle the funding for Planned Parenthood. There's a track record in terms of what positions he stands for. His job, in theory, will be likely to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. So what's the leading medical association, the American Medical Association's position on Tom Price? They endorsed him. And they endorsed him pretty strongly, saying this is a person who is great experience, understands policy, has been in the game a long time, and is committed to these issues. So why did they do that? And was it the right thing? They're losing a lot of members on it. The woman who actually gave that statement, Patrice Harris, is a really smart, really good physician who led Atlanta Fulton County's public health department for years. She's worked with Tom Price very closely. In fact, through her leadership, got him, he's actually a very big proponent of CDC. In theory, gets some prevention issues. And the reality is, what I would call what AMA did is a strategic retreat. I'm not sure they would say that, but that's how I would frame it. They had to do it because they're going to see him, want him to be an ally, to listen to their fact patterns, listen to their information, and have a foot in the door to try to inform and influence how this actually gets shaped. Because the Affordable Care Act, there's been the rhetoric to dismantle it, but I'm not so sure at the end of the day how much is really going to get rolled back. And that's the big question. Because they can't take 20 million people. I mean, they could, but those are also now 20 million people who are voting. A lot of the Affordable Care Act was actually coming out, and there are many experts far more developed and sophisticated on this issue than me, but this came out of, many of the provisions came out of the Republican playbook. This was a bill originally crafted using a number of their different concepts and ideas. So the irony is while the rhetoric has been about dismantling, there probably is an opportunity to dismantle it, repackage it, and maybe even fix the many things that we knew were holes and gaps and call it something else. Now, I'm not a forecaster here, but that's, I think, the play that's going on with AMA. They did a strategic retreat. They used their spokesperson who knows Tom Price, who has a relationship. They took a risk in saying they're going to endorse him because you know what? There is nothing that anyone's going to do short of him shooting someone on Fifth Avenue, but we were told that that might not even matter anymore either. Tom Price is going to get, especially as a congressman, he is going to get approved. You don't waste your energy on a losing battle like that versus take the strategic retreat. Get yourself to be a player in where a fight that your facts are going to actually make a difference and matter because he will listen to them. Based on relationships, he was a member of AMA, and at the end of the day, they need that kind of information to package back together something that works. It might be smoking something to think it's going to actually be better, but it might be something that's crafted that is workable, to be determined. Now the flip side, you got another nomination going on with Scott Pruett, who is the administrator nominee for the Environmental Protection Agency. There is no strategic retreat happening out there. There is not a single environmental organization that's saying, yeah, attaboy, let's give him a try. Why? Why such a difference? You know, on one, it's a strategic retreat for the play and being in the game. And yet, you know, League of Conservation Voters, Gene Karpinski is, you know, Scott is putting the fox in charge of the hen house. And that was the nicest comment that I saw of all the quotes. What's going on? Yeah.
At least from what I've read, there's not anything to repackage. A lot of the work that we've done is good and moving in the right direction. So you have someone who is trying to just roll a lot of that back and take steps back. So I'm not sure everyone feels like there's any gain from trying to repackage it.
There's no repackaging, 100% right. This is what is anticipated, and again, this is following what people have said, and based on the appointees, this is all about rolling back. This is probably the thing that's most similar to the 104th Congress contract. The rhetoric that you're hearing from the various environmental groups is, this is a climate denier, and you're going to hear that phrase over and over again because this defense is about creating a staging for the American public to get it that that's too far, because the American public does not want rollbacks on climate protections. The American public, the data shows, does think that this is a man-made contribution and does support the fixes that have been moving forward. The language that is coming out and the defense and fighting and opposing Scott Pruett is not because they think they're going to win it. They will not win that battle. He will get appointed, despite being the climate denier and a fossil fuel lover. You know, there are all kinds of things out there, but you're going to see this over and over again because it's setting a stage, not a stage to win this battle, but a stage to create an understanding with the American public that there is an overreach in dismantling the environmental protections that the American public wants. And this is, I think there's going to be a replay similar to clean water, clean air, the climate issues, that there in fact, there will be regulations that are rolled back. but they will get exposed, they will be talked about, and I believe that the environmental community will be working very clearly on what would be the kinds of protections and wins to achieve should it come to that point down the road when a deal can be struck. So those don't sound like great wins, though, do they? This is like, you know, getting your fort ready for a grand siege. But there are places for public health to particularly engage and have that ability to win. It could be on the Affordable Care Act. It's going to be a tough one, but if that's your area and work, it is not all for naught. I think this is, again, where facts will matter, not necessarily in the public sphere, but working at the agency, working with key members of Congress, working with both sides of the aisle. It really is critical not to go into these issues in a partisan way. It has been my experience over and over again that you can never win on a public health issue if it is seen as a one-party, partisan approach. That the wins that we've had, even in a democratic environment, they don't happen if you don't have the Republican support. And that's going to be vice versa here, too. But from a professional standpoint, it is absolutely critical to not have this be politicized, but to go in with a bipartisan methodology. And that's true with the odd bedfellows approach. And thinking about who may not be your normal allies, but if you had them at the table with you supporting the positions that you're doing, it's an amazing game changer, and particularly in this post-factual world. I don't think it's post-factual. I think it was Ruth Marcus in a column a few days ago that started the opening of this. That's the talk. That's because the reverberations that we saw from the election. But I think it's a post-trusting world. People don't trust. Many, they don't trust the news. They don't trust their politicians. There are not a lot of people they trust. But the data does show that they trust the medical and health field. That's this room. And we may not have that trust for a real long time if we play loose with the facts. If we're really here as bipartisan, we're here on this is what the science tells us. It's tempting to sometimes get hyperbolic because that's the way the world's going. That's how you get on, help me on a cultural reference. It's not how you get on The Voice, but it's how you get on reality TV is you get a little cuckoo. I don't think we're ever going to have a public health reality show. We're a little too staid for that, but that's a good thing because at the end of the day, people trust us. And it's a credibility issue that's our most valuable commodity that we bring to all of these efforts out here. So, ultimate win. I think there actually are a number of places, and it's part when I had said we have to be smart and strategic and sustainable. I think one reference I was making is you have to be thinking about at the end of the day, having at the ready, what would be the proposal that made sense that you knew that a bipartisan, Republican-leaning world would take on a certain fix with ACA? Or what would be a way on addressing one of the climate regs that may have been causing trouble here, but in fact, you show the clear pattern case that if you did it just a little bit like this, you might be able to get an acceptable protection in place. It's thinking about what would be reasonable, pragmatic, and having it there at the ready is key. But I think, Ellen, you had mentioned Keisha's doing a talk down the road on transportation. No pun intended. And I think she's titling, I heard something about a real win. Infrastructure, yeah, infrastructure, there's a sexy word. Another public health, you know, we know how to do it, but this whole arena of health and all policies, which I know Keisha and many others are taking on, you know, this is what the data, here we go again with the facts, but we know the social determinants of health. I can say that here in a public health setting. That most of the policies that really make a difference in people's lives are not health policies. You know, they're quality, universal, early education. It's complete streets, transportation issues, making sure a street is safe for a pedestrian, a bicyclist, a car, and that we've got mass transit. It's financial security, inclusionary zoning on housing. You know, it's some of those aren't our classic health issues, but those are actually, are you familiar with CDC's High Five program they just rolled out? It's worth taking a look on their site, where they basically have identified a series of policies that are proven that within 5 years will have a high return of investment in lives. You will see a substantial improvement in health outcomes within 5 years with a set of policies, and most of them aren't health related. They're social determinants of health. And that's an area that actually might be an extraordinary opportunity for us in this absolutely crazy upside down time. And I part say that because what has the rhetoric been in the election, both Trump and Clinton, and you're hearing that may be one of the first legislative packages coming out in this next administration, which is an infrastructure bill. It's going to happen. How much money is, I think, what will be the debate. But it's going to be, what's the technical term? A crap load. Can I say that on I'm an environmental health person, so I'm allowed to use these highly sophisticated terms. It's going to be an incredible amount of money. And it's going to go into housing, it's going to go into transportation, it's going to go into basics where cities, states, with a little bit of good public health data, understanding that if that new investment of dollars can go into assuring some of the programs on affordable housing or complete streets or some of the basics that we know in public health where those policies will have huge outcomes, but they're not happening, they're not enforceable, they're not in place because we haven't had that kind of new dollars coming in or political will. But if we can show the return on investment, which is actually, again, what CDC has done in some of these places, and tie that in with the enormous infusion of dollars going out to cities, out to states, this is an incredible opportunity for a real win on public health issues. But it's like the wolf in sheep's clothing, and public health has to be, for once, the wolf. We're usually the ones being hunted. Doesn't sound very pleasant, but this is a time to rethink and reconsider where are those best opportunities. So cities where you've got innovation, you've got almost a contest out there with mayors of leading the charge in health. I think there was this mayor in New York, this guy named Bloomberg, and actually involved in an analysis right now that has taken the 9 key policies and each in an area of social determinants of health and is analyzing the largest 40 cities in this country and how do they fare with their implementation of those policies. And what I'd like to see happen at some point is the data on life expectancy that we know out there, where we see huge differentials from city to city, zip code to zip code within a city. Baltimore, I just heard, it can be 20-year difference of life expectancy based on where you are. And based on Chetty and some of the others, it belief that it may be the policies that those cities have in place that are the difference maker. It may be these social determinants of health-oriented policies that are the real difference maker. And I'm going to tell you, New York City is coming out as the absolute top gold standard of implementing all these policies. And I anticipate that we're going to see a correlation with the Chetty data and our coverage of policies, to be determined. But this is where the action is. And a lot of these cities have not put in place this, but it's in this new administration, there's a defense. There may be some opportunities because of overreach. There's certainly help needed to continue the battle on salvaging and maybe even strengthening, at the end of the day, ACA. But we also have to look at different venues of where we can have the biggest impact. And it may be city and state in this health and all policies that will actually have some of the biggest health outcome bonanza from a policy standpoint in the next 4 years. The irony of that infusion of new dollars, new impetus, creating the innovation opportunities for public health to get those wins. So we got to think differently. We got to think creatively. We got to stay true to our facts. And it is why I'm not shilling the class I'm teaching in January, but facts do matter in a few places. And if you know where to put them to work, and it's particularly in the regulatory arena, they can be game changers. But you got to stick true to the evidence and keep the trust that we have in our field alive and well. You got to sustain it. We're going to get through these 4 years. I think we don't know what's going to come out of it. You will be in the fight of your lives. I think it will be story making. It will be incredibly frustrating. I'm still crying every so often when I see what's coming along, but I do see a number of key opportunities. But we gotta stay focused and kick a little. Now, what's the word I can use here? Yeah, sure, that. There are opportunities, and I think we just have to keep the faith and keep the focus in terms of where we can get those wins and make things happen. So let me turn this back over to you, and maybe we kind of do a back and forth. Thoughts? How crazy is this? Where can you put Al Sommer, please?
So Shelley, like all of us, are trying to find some light in the tunnel. It's not an oncoming train. And here's my fantasy. If history repeats itself, there's only 2 years of this Congress. Well, the midterm elections, at least one of the houses will flip. So that's going to block any dramatic changes 2 years hence. So the real issue is what can we do over the next 2 years. So that's my other real fantasy, and that is we don't have permanent secretaries like the UK has, but we have a permanent bureaucracy.
Yes.
And it will be really hard with hearings and everything else, at least to get many regulatory changes over those first 2 years, a year and a half, and then everyone's running for re-election. What's your take on that? I mean, everything you've said is absolutely right, and we have to do what we can in the meantime, but I do have some hope that the time that we're at great risk is fairly limited.
Right. So it's 2 parts. Let me start with 2 years out. Normally you're right. And depending on what happens in this administration and what the Congress does, because there's no gridlock. Gridlock is over at the national level. Good news, bad news. Gridlock is over. They're going to move things. They're going to be seen as a doing Congress. Many anticipate the Affordable Care Act will actually not go away in that first 2 years. It will be shifted so it happens in the 3rd year just because of those midterm elections. So it depends on which Trump shows up and what happens and what the climate, one. But two, if you take a look at the electoral map, it's not really pretty for Democrats to shift over. That's particularly true in the Senate. Most of the Senate spots that are open in 2 years are Democrat seats. So even if they win, it's status quo. So most people don't believe Senate will go. House might, but it's also been so, it's the word I want to use and not sounding too partisan, it has been so districted and so safe for the current Republican members of Congress that I don't, unless things really go south, it's probably not likely to change. But it depends on what happens.
Take away my fantasy.
This is dangerous territory, Al, to but I hear you. But I don't know that we can rest on that one. If they overreach, then yes, it's going to change. But they've been through the 104th Congress too. So that is why the conversation's out there of shifting the Affordable Care Act to be 3 years out, but still make changes. So to be determined. I really, that's the take. Your second point is a really good one. Of the, it was going to, depending on what comes up with questions, kind of run through where do you focus your energy, where are your best opportunities for impact. So on the regulatory side, with the agencies, your point being that the culture, the workforce, is a permanent force, unless the Department of Energy gets shut down. I don't think that's going to happen because they're going to find out that 60% of the responsibility of the Department of Energy is to manage and oversee the nuclear weapons supply in the country. It's not about energy. It is important, actually. I mean, I think when reality and start to get into the governance job, things will change. I personally want to start, do you remember, again, this is going to be an age thing, so I apologize, but during the Vietnam War, you would get these POW bracelets, and you literally have a name of a POW as a way to personalize and get create support. I think we need to do that for federal bureaucrats. I'm thinking that, they are going to be so critical. And as someone who's down in Washington, my entire neighborhood is pretty much people who work in the federal agencies. And these are good people who are content experts. They are there to get their job done. And they're scared and they're demoralized. They're scared because one of the transition teams sticking with DOE, the questionnaire was, will you name anyone in the agency who's gone to a climate change conference, who's been asked to do research, who's done a paper? It was appearance of a witch hunt. That's not how bureaucracy and government's supposed to work. We do have these checks and balances and these protections, but it's a little bit of there's a new sheriff in town, and there are new rules being created. So we need to have that culture stay, but you may get a bit of an exodus. You may have some of the union protection rules, some of the bureaucracy rules getting changed. It's hard to turn the Titanic quickly, so that is true. I think the other piece is you can't just, for the most part, dismantle the regulations that are in place. Except there's some new rules out there that are coming along that will give the ability to undo fairly recent regulations. David, I don't know, you want to?
Yeah, the fear of all of that in here. I love your fantasy. Thanks for a great talk, and I want to sort of second, I have great hopes for the bureaucracy, just having lived through watching them slow everything down in periods like this. At the same time, the first 100 days are going to be really different in certain ways this time around.
Yeah.
The first 60 days are going to be really important because of something called the Congressional Review Act,
Yeah.
which permits Congress to roll back
since May 15th of this year. There are about 1,500 of them, and these can be done by majority. They're not subject to filibuster, and there are no hearings. So that's the first 60 days. And there are little things like nutrition labeling, water and sanitation, you know.
Well,
I mean,
all the recent climate change
Yeah, all the recent
provisions,
climate
the clean power rules.
So, and then there's, you all may remember from the ACA fight that the Democrats used the BRA, the Budget Reconciliation Act, to get the ACA through. Well, Republicans have not forgotten that. And we will have a BRA sometime this spring. And that will be the CRA is the retrospective, it's their defensive move to cut everything away. The BRA is their proactive move, and that's where the first steps to undo the ACA, but also to do things like defund Planned Parenthood are likely to happen. And again, in the Budget Reconciliation Act, there are no hearings, and it's not subject to the filibuster. So things can happen really fast, and it's going to be really important to be alert. And also, I mean, I loved what you said about focus and thinking about the messaging and thinking about uniting around certain sort of meta themes
Yeah.
that can be used to characterize what's happening in a way that wins the majority of public support behind this is going too far.
And that hasn't happened yet. You know, these conversations are just starting. I mean, this was flat-footed. Well, one, don't know, and two, was unanticipated. Shame on all of us, I suppose. But it is the reality, and that again gets back to you always got you always got to be prepared. You got to be prepared for a possible win too, and when to take advantage of that. But we've got to build a momentum for people. You know, according to the data, folks didn't vote for an agenda on these issues. They voted for change. There was a frustration. Didn't want the same. You know, we can go into all kinds of post-analytics, but at the end of the day, people were frustrated. And that was a little bit universal and unspecific. It wasn't about going and dismantling climate change protections. It's not about not having health care. It's just, I mean, it's been so demonized. It's in getting it so that it is something that works, is perceiving as working, and that the American public wants. So there's a lot of work to be done. And public health was the key message with the success in the 104th Congress. And the irony was the environmental community used health messages. It used lead, it used arsenic, it used things that people could get. And the working community, you know, all of the different interest groups rallied around that, even though that was not their cause and their issue. And I think your point is right. It is to be determined, but that organizing is just starting. This is just happening. These conversations are just taking place. And it is, I think, a lot will happen in this next 100 days. But back to your fantasy, Al, it's not a fantasy, and our best hope right now is that the agencies will not, because of both rules and the professionalism, are not just going to have a sea change, blowing up of all the rules and protections out there. Beth.
So on a more optimistic note,
That wasn't optimistic.
That was. We want to make his fantasy true.
in terms of the things that David was talking about, I think we're automatically assuming that all of the Republicans are on the same page. And number one, I don't think that's quite true. And then so that's I'd like you to comment on that. And the second thing, you talked about the cities, but it seems to me that the rural areas and that was more of the big push in this election. So I'm curious if you could mention about that.
Yeah. So my focus on cities was not addressing rural issues. And in fact, the irony is some of the key public health issues that are happening today are of equal impact, if not worse, rurally than they are in an urban setting. The opioid epidemic is a key example on that. And that just in terms of, we don't know from a policy standpoint what works on addressing the opioid epidemic. And if anyone wants to argue with me, I would love that. I am hungry to hear a viable local policy that is addressing the prevention side of opioid abuse and the epidemic. Right now it's predominantly about access, it's dollars, it's treatment. And naloxone, which I'm pro naloxone, but that's not prevention.
Well, and there's prescribing of opioids.
Yes, and then you get into the prescription monitoring program, but it's state level. I'm talking at local, kind of on the ground. What do you say?
Take-back programs.
Take-back programs are interesting, but there's absolutely no evidence that it does anything. It's a nice thing, but there's no. There goes those facts again. Want some evidence that but that's where we are right now. And so I hard focus on cities because they're willing to do some of the innovations. Let's stick with New York and what Bloomberg did. It was actually taking a risk on some of the policies when not all the evidence was there. That's what a lot of the obesity, childhood obesity, a lot of the soda, everyone's like, oh, you can't do that because we don't know what's the causal factors here, so how could you have a policy in place? But what we did see was the combination of approaches worked. So I just see cities as an engine where you've got governors, a governance system that's willing to still govern. It's not locked in partisan politics. They just got to get the job done, and they're willing to innovate. And I think the dollars are going to come in, so it's where new ideas and new opportunities are coming. They're just an engine. What was your first?
That we shouldn't assume that all the.
Oh, 100%. I actually thank you for bringing it up. And it's part where I was trying to say, and I'm going to just say it again, public health cannot be, and it is not partisan. I mean, the irony is you almost wanted it to be partisan in the past because it was such a Cinderella that no one cared about it. Democrats, Republicans, on a lot of really core public health issues. Good news is we're getting a little more attention. Bad news is we're getting a little more attention, but we have got to have champions on both sides. And Paul and I have worked, Paul Locke and I worked on a commission that was based here at Hopkins, where the chair of the commission had been a 3-term U.S. Senator Republican from Connecticut. He had chaired the Senate Health and Human Services Appropriations Committee. It's not really its name, but actually this is a policycrat. I can say the real name, can't I? Yeah. Health, labor, maybe I shouldn't. And FIFRA is fungicides.
It'll be in the test.
Thank you. It's funny when you get here and the lights are on, the microphone's on. Every acronym is gone. He really taught us on if you're going to get these issues moved, you have got to get champions on both sides. And in fact, your best odds are if you can get that Republican voice, if you can show the return on investment, if you can show how it's working for half the country, that's when you're going to start to move issues and advance issues. And I'm convinced that so many of the issues that we work on today do have support out there. But we're going to have to thread this needle again of there's so much noise, distraction, pressure, and not to be a champion on these, that we have to, I mean, ironically, Tom Price is he's focused on opioid abuse. He supported and hosted a congressional briefing that the Big Cities Health Coalition, which I was helping put together 2 years ago, he was the one who hosted it. He's the only one who, it's the first time I've seen a member of Congress actually show up at their own briefing on these, what are seen as minor issues. It was not the big sexy thing. He actually showed up, he got the room, he gave an introduction, and he didn't leave. Stayed for the whole thing. You know, it's a different world out there, and we're going to have to think differently, and we can't be in our own little boxes. So, really good point. Oh.
I'm curious about how you think some of what you've just talked about applies to reproductive health. And we have the return on investment case. We have public support for Planned Parenthood. We don't really have Republican champions that I'm aware of, or at least not local ones. And I'm not sure how, under this administration, do we just have to rely on the courts? Do you think there is room in either the regulatory or legislative room space for reproductive health? And not to mention international reproductive health through the USAID network that always gets thrown under the bus.
I am not expert in this area, but from those that I talk to who are, there is already game plans going on of an assumption that federal funds will disappear. So how do places like Planned Parenthood locally survive? What do they do? What's the new model? The good news right now is an incredible amount of money is coming in from donations, but most of that is for the political side versus the practice side, the actual day-to-day work they do. I'm going to go out on a limb on this one, but did you remember from the election how often, this was at the primaries, Donald Trump would go, no, wait, Planned Parenthood isn't that bad. Hold on, guys. Now, that stopped me. I mean, I remember it because I was like, I'm sitting there going, what? What? Because particularly in the primaries, that was a dangerous thing to say. My understanding is his daughter, Ivanka, is a supporter and a champion, and Trump has in the past donated to Planned Parenthood. I don't know. I don't know what to believe. I don't know. And I want to have a little like, oh, there's some hope and possibility. But I do also know as an advocate that the actions speak far louder than those words. And when you put someone who is on a pathway and their political message has been to defund Planned Parenthood, and they are now in charge of the Health and Human Services Agency, every bell is ringing. I don't care what Ivanka thinks, but I want to have hope. I have fantasies too. This is a very odd conversation. Not really what I expected to be doing in the, I think you got to plan for the worst, but be creative on keeping radical ideas alive. And yes, that's about how do you get to the Ivankas? How do you get to Trump in a different way? And those are some of the things we're going to have to figure out. It's about being willing to be creative, and this is not all set, clear box, but there is big danger and big risk. Yes?
The question, this is terrific question. I have a comment and a question. I think I'm an optimist that most of the ACAs are going to stay in place because of some financial realities on both sides. So I think that's something you can build upon in this new administration, in particular with Price and Vermo in place, because there's some track record of those two that we work with. The question I had is that, building on that, you made a very provocative comment about the 104th Congress, that the advocacy groups all came together and focused on a message that got through all this clutter. And so the question is, going forward, if we assume that one of the pillars might be healthcare, is there a role for school public health, like Hopkins with Bloomberg, et cetera, to be able to accelerate the coming together of that meta message? So that, because we don't have a lot of time. So the question is,
No.
Could we do something like that? What are your thoughts about? Can you elaborate on what happened in the 104th Congress? Are there lessons that we could use now to accelerate this kind of coming together?
Right. In some ways, the advantage the 104th had is that there was a book put out. There was a lot of forecasting. There was a clear trend. This wasn't a surprise. So it gave time to build those alliances, create capabilities. And there were actually more organizations then than there are now that had the ability to do that kind of total messaging. There's actually, since the financial crisis, not quite the same advocacy capacity in some of these areas. Yes, Hopkins could play a convening role. I think it could be a convening not so much on messaging and branding, because that's not, they call it provocative, but it's not the core competency. It's not what this place does, nor should it. But what this place does really well, and is its sweet spot, is evidence-based. And so the question would be, could there be the role, and particularly with this new initiative, I did see Josh Sharfstein here before, but I think he snuck out, smart man. I knew him when he was this tall. I heard that, yeah. With the new initiative, this might be that kind of thing, a convening opportunity from a lot of the social determinant of health key fields, like early ed, like transportation, like housing. What do you know is the evidence base? Take the CDC high five. You know, taking a look at what is our best data that knocks it out of the park, that this is absolutely what we should be doing, and this is good for America and rural America, and you know, put together what do we know and what's our best of, what's our top hits, with a mindset of what's going to get dismantled and is at risk, and that would be, in a sense, from an evidence standpoint, your poster child. That could be a process, but it would be really good to have that coupled with some of the conversations that are taking place in those other fields that are in the pit bull advocacy, the messaging, the communications. Hopkins has to, and this has always been the line with the word advocacy here at Hopkins. Well, we used to joke years ago that advocacy was a 4-letter word. You know what that means? I'm really bringing this group down here. But it was seen as a risk, as a threat to your science, that you shouldn't be out translating what the evidence says into the policy-making world. And I think what the beauty of what's happened is that I think it's come full circle of the responsibility of public health is the public part is translating that science to the public, into the public, so it serves the public. And advocacy can be done in all kinds of ways. This isn't setting up a protest over a pipeline. And that's not being said disparagingly. That's a role and that's important, but that's not what public health professionals, that's not the sweet spot. Right here, it's the science and the data in a way that people can understand and care about, and the sanctity of that. That's, again, it's back to that credibility thing and role. And that is a critical part of advocacy that there's not as much being pumped in. And I worry, because we're in a post-factual world, that people are going to forget that part. And it's not what's going on. Facts still matter. Should probably end right there.
That we owe Shelley lots of thanks for coming and spending this time with us.
Thanks for having me.
I love your optimism. I like your collective fantasies.
His fantasy is better. You know, it's
keep the fantasies alive, and I think your bottom line message is something we have to keep coming back to, and it's critically
great.
important. So
Thanks.
thanks for
Nice
coming.
to be here.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.